So today we're going to go into Daniel chapter 5, and what I've titled this chapter is Weighed in the Balances and Art Found Waiting, or Art Found Wanting. That's the message Daniel gives to the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, who is Belshazzar. So we're going to look at Belshazzar today and learn from him and see how he didn't learn, and his failure to learn cost him dearly. Now, I put a picture up here. Most of you can see it. This is from ancient Egypt, and this is a scales, an actual scales from ancient Egypt, and they're weighing different things here. And a scale, a balance, was a very important thing in those days because they used balances in all their financial endeavors. And so I wanted you to see what their balance actually looked like. Okay, so this is the chart that you have on page 82. And you have most of this filled in already. 605, when Jerusalem was taken by Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel and his three friends were placed under Babylonian assimilation program. Then in 602, 3 years later, Daniel and his friends completed their initiation, and Nebuchadnezzar has a statue dream and calls Daniel forward. And in 586, Jerusalem and the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. And somewhere in that year, or maybe the fiery furnace. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add, Daniel was probably 14 when this started. That would make him 17 with his first dream interpretation for the king. And 33 when the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians and the fiery furnace event occurred with the three other Jewish guys. So this will kind of give us a rolling account of how old Daniel is as these various events occur. Now, the captivity of Daniel occurred during the 3rd year of Jehoiakim. He was the king of Judah, and Nebuchadnezzar came. He was called home because his father, Nebuchadnezzar, was very ill. And many people thought he was going to die, so they wanted Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon at that time so he could be ordained as king. So they called him back from the field. And while he was coming back from the field, he took a shortcut along the coast and had to go right by Jerusalem. And he remembered some of his emissaries said, they got good things in that temple. They got gold and they got silver and they got some really smart kids. So on your way back, you need to raid it. And that's exactly what he did. Now, Jehoiakim was a bad king, and he bought his way out of the attack from Nebuchadnezzar by offering him some of the vessels that they used in the temple. And those vessels are going to turn up in our lesson today. But he not only offered those vessels, he also offered the best kids in the realm that would be his future competition. You see, Jehoiakim wanted to get rid of Daniel because Daniel was the best they had and everybody knew it, and Daniel was a threat to Jehoiakim. And Jehoiakim was threatened by Daniel, so this was an opportunity for him to get rid of him. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, get rid of them. Run those guys off.
14-year-olds they were afraid of?
Oh, yeah. These guys were so exceptional. They were tremendous, okay? When did I see that tape? Today is Wednesday. Monday night, I watched a 4-year-old girl play one of Rachmaninoff's most difficult pieces on the piano. She didn't miss a note. 4 years old, okay? 4 years old. So some kids are truly gifted, okay? Truly gifted. I know there's a young man who, his brother wanted a piano. His brother was 10 and he was 8. So the parents brought this piano and brought a piano tuner to tune it. And while the piano tuner played a song, he went out to the truck to get more tools, and that song played again. It was the 8-year-old. Had watched the tuner play the piano. And when the tuner got up and walked away, he sat down at the piano and he played the exact song. So the tuner sat down and he played some Bach. He says, now you try. The kid didn't try. He nailed it, note for note. Okay, so some kids are extremely gifted. That's my son Benjamin. Okay, he's so gifted on the piano. Some kids are like that. And at 14, these kids were the best. And they were a threat to that king. So he wanted them out of his kingdom. Okay?
But Daniel was 14, and the other guys might have been 12.
Might have
a couple
been.
Years younger, weren't they?
It never says that. We imply that they weren't the same age, but we don't really know that. Daniel acts older because Daniel had more gifts. And one of the gifts he had that the other ones didn't have is a gift of persuasion. So that may have made him look older. I don't know any scripture that tells me there was an age difference between those four young men. We assume that there was, but I don't know that there was. Okay, so watch this. They've been able to date when the 7 periods of madness occurred for Nebuchadnezzar and when he died from a worm. Okay? So the time period should be 7. It's not. In 566, Daniel was 53. In 562, he was 57. You can't put 7 years in there, but you can fit 7 months in there and some time left over. So there's another piece of evidence that shows that period of time was not 7 years, but 7 months. Then in 554, Daniel had the vision of the 4 beasts that we haven't seen yet. And if you've read Daniel 7, it is one of the most perplexing and difficult messianic prophecies of the end times, right? The 49 sevens and all that stuff in Daniel 7, okay? Daniel was 65 when he had that dream. And he was 71 when he had the dream of the ram and the goat. Belshazzar's feast that we're going to study today, he was 80. And Darius the Mede assumed power in Babylon when Daniel was 80. And Daniel read Jeremiah. And Jeremiah talks about the 70 years of captivity. Daniel in the lion's den, we know that he was 81. And when he had his prophetic vision about the end times, when he sees the illuminated figure, probably Christ, Daniel was 84. So that shows you how he ties in to each of these events from his age. Okay? Any questions? I thought that would be useful for you to have that information. That was a full life. Okay? Lots of things going on there. We're going to focus now on Daniel 5, Belshazzar's feast, and Cyrus, the king of Persia, who came with Darius the Mede, and Gubaru. We'll talk about who Gubaru is, maybe today, maybe next week. But in this day and age, it was very common for 2 kings or 3 kings to rule together. When Belshazzar is ruling, he has a co-regent. Does anybody know what his name is?
You told us last week.
Nabonidus or Nabonidus, his father. They co-reigned, okay? And we'll talk about why they were apart and why Nabonidus was not at the feast with Belshazzar. And we'll look at that as we go through this chapter. So when Belshazzar offers gifts to someone who can read the writing on the wall, he says, I will make you the 3rd ruler. That's behind Nabonidus, Belshazzar, and Daniel become the 3 people who for one day ruled together the province of Babylon. They were displaced by 3 people, Cyrus, Darius, and Gubaru, for one day. And then Gubaru was dispatched with. Okay? He found the wrong end of a lance. Okay? Came out the top of his head. I'll let you imagine the rest of it. Okay? These guys didn't fool around. All right. So this is the source of all this information. This is the Nabonidus Chronicle. This is the second one. And this is the Nabonidus Cylinder. And these are actual historical artifacts in the British Museum that gives you all this information about the history of what happened in that Nebuchadnezzar's time and kingdom. So that's historical record as accurate as you could get with the Nabonidus into it. Okay? All right. Now, Nabonidus, or Nabonidus, was the father and co-regent with Belshazzar during the final years of the Babylonian Empire. Nabonidus was a warrior king. Belshazzar was a party boy. So Belshazzar stayed in Babylon. And Nabonidus didn't stay in Babylon because they had a conflict with each other. And the conflict was which god they believed was the top god. Nabonidus, okay, he worshiped the moon god Sin. Belshazzar worshiped Marduk. And the priests and priestesses of Marduk and the priests and priestesses of Sin would kill each other. They didn't get along. So Nabonidus took his priests and priestesses and he went to a town, an oasis called Tema in northern Arabia. And that's where he was when Cyrus and Darius and Gubaru invaded Babylon. He lived through it and lived on to an old age because he wasn't in the city when it was taken. So I just wanted to plug in some of that history that you may not be aware of. Okay? So Nabonidus fled Babylon around 549, and he went to Tema, where he had his castle. It's in northern Arabia, and he also was exiled there after Cyrus and Darius killed his son in 539. Okay. So now let's look at Daniel 5 as a chapter and break it into pieces for us to study. The first thing I always like to cover is the history. Does anyone have any questions about the history before we go on to the full chapter? Okay. So if you'll turn to, I think it's 83. And I don't know if you've noticed it yet, but I usually put up here an address for you to go into your handout. Okay, so this is in the middle of page 83. You'll find this text. All right? Back here, this one is in page 82. So I try to give you that so you can tie to it. I don't know, did anybody notice that up there? Okay, good. So Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Let me point them out here. Who drank wine? Not the 1,000. The king drank wine before the 1,000. See, this is where you got to read what it says. Okay? Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Some people have said this verse proves the Bible is wrong because they didn't have 1,000 vessels for them all to drink out of those. Well, it doesn't say they drank out of them. Okay? I'm not challenging the inerrancy of the Bible. I'm challenging the errancy of the church and its teaching, sloppy teaching. So I'm going to put a division there. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast, and then in the same hour came forth fingers. Those are obviously very different thoughts, so I'm going to cut my division line at verse 4. And verses 1 through 4 will be the first part that we study. And I'm going to now underline the phrases in that package, and you can underline them as I go. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords. He commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken out of the temple. Now, I just want to clarify something. I told you Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. This says Nebuchadnezzar was his father. That is the word in Aramaic for grandfather, not father. Okay? So we're okay with that. His concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods. Now we know they were added to the drinkers. They got some wine. They praised the gods of gold, of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and stone. So what might me title that first phrase? I'm going to title it Belshazzar defiles the temple vessels. Now most authors write that he defiled the vessels of the temple when he had his whores drink out of them. That has nothing to do with it. He defiled the articles of the temple when he praised the gods of gold, silver, and brass. That's how he defiled them, by praising another god other than Jehovah God. So the violation he's made is not having his concubines drink from the vessels. That's a minor thing. The major thing is he's saying Jehovah God is not one and only God. Okay? Then in the next place, from verse 5 on, I've underlined, in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand. It does not say, in the same hour came forth a man's hand. And most people teach that's what it says. It doesn't say that. It's not the handwriting on the wall, it's the finger writing on the wall. A hand didn't write it, the fingers of the hand wrote it. And why? Before they would have a banquet, guess what they did to the banquet hall? They cleaned it up for the banquet. And they would whitewash the walls with new plaster. And it's very easy to take your finger and write in the clean plaster that was just put on a couple hours before. Makes perfect sense. So on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace against the candlestick, the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers. He said to the wise men of Babylon, "Show me the interpretation." But they could not read the writing, number one, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof, number two. Now, even if they could have read the writing, do you know what the writing says? Mene, mene, tekel, parsin is 3 coins. And it lists 3 different coins. They wouldn't have understood it anyway. So simply be able to read it isn't enough. You got to know how to interpret that. So what I'm calling this piece, from 5 to 9, that we'll look at in detail, is no one can read the writing on the wall. Belshazzar, greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him. He was afraid at what was written there. So that's the first 2 sections that we'll study. Verses 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house. And the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There's a man in thy kingdom. Let me stop for a minute. How does verse 10 sound to you? Doesn't it sound like a mama saying, don't worry, little Bruce, it'll be okay. Mama says everything will be fine. You don't have to worry about it, okay? This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most important women of all time who ever lived. This queen is the queen mother of Babylon, Notorious. And boy, is she something. And we're going to study Notorious and learn about her. She doesn't ask them to do things. She tells them what to do. And I'll show you why in a minute. There's a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom King Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now, let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. The competent lady, she was there. She saw what Daniel did 25 years earlier. She's an eyewitness. She's Notaris, the Queen Mother. I may as well tell you this now. 2 people had the authority to instantly declare your head absent from your shoulders in the kingdom of Babylon. 2 people. Number 1 was the king. Number 2 was Queen Mama. Okay? She had full authority. You don't like what I say? Gone. Rolling on the dirt. Bruce is hearsay. He's gone. He's done. All right? This is one powerful lady we're going to learn about. So I'm going to put my dividing line there. The queen, by reason of the words of the king, came into the banquet house. And then as Daniel was brought before the king, these are 2 different chapters. That's obvious. Two different thoughts. So we're going to look at this first one and see what else is here. The queen spake and said, King, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee. There is a man in thy kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. So what does she believe? She's a polytheist. She believes in a lot of gods. And now Daniel has communication with all of them. She doesn't say Daniel has the spirit of the holy God, the greatest God above all gods. She doesn't believe that. So she doesn't say it. Your father, Nebuchadnezzar, he made him master of the magicians and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers. He had an excellent spirit. He interpreted dreams. He showed hard sentences. What does the king want Daniel to do? Interpret a hard sentence that's been written on the wall. I want this lady writing my resume. She knows how to write the perfect fit-for-purpose resume, which is exactly what she did. What you need to fill this job, Belshazzar, is a guy who can interpret the hard sentences and dissolve doubt in your mind. The only one who can do that is Daniel, and I'm an eyewitness. He's the one. Go get him. I want her to write my resume. She knows how to do it. Daniel, who the king named Belteshazzar. Now, do you remember when we studied, when Daniel was named, what Belteshazzar means? Do you remember?
Protector of the king.
Protector of the king. Okay? She says, Daniel is here to protect you. Go get him. You don't have to be afraid. He'll take care of you. Go get him. And he'll show the interpretation. Now, he might show. He will show it to you. So let Daniel be called to interpret the words. Okay? I had titled this differently at first. I had titled this Notaris Has Moxie. That was the first way I titled it, because she does. Okay? All right. Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah. Remember those kids you got from Judah, the smart ones? Daniel's one of these guys. Okay? Now, Daniel was brought before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, I've heard of thee that thou can make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if thou canst read the writing, he's not showing confidence, he's doubting, okay? And make known unto me the interpretation, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, have a chain of gold around thy neck, and be the third ruler in the kingdom. What does scarlet mean? That's the royal robe of the king and queen. If Pete wore it, he's dead, because only they're allowed to wear it. Okay? The golden chain around the neck contained the signet ring of the king, and there were 3 of them. Nabonidus has one, Belshazzar has the other, and Daniel's going to get the 3rd one. And he'll be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. So I'm going to title this one, Daniel Offered Prizes to Read the Writing. The most expensive prizes that kingdom has to offer. All right? Next group. Then Daniel answered and said before thy king, keep your treasure, buddy. Let thy gifts be to thyself. You have nothing that interests me. And give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. King, I'm going to give you a freebie, and you don't owe me anything for it. I'm going to tell you what it says, and I'm going to give you the interpretation. You don't have to give me anything. Then, O thou his son Belshazzar, has not humbled thine heart. This is the accusation against Belshazzar, so I'm putting my dividing line down here at 21. So this group is going to cover Daniel's answer to the king. He's going to read the writing and make known the interpretation. The Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Nebuchadnezzar fell, and he is reminding the king of that. Till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over whomever he will. So this is the lesson of Nebuchadnezzar. Pride will bring you down. And Daniel's telling the king, you've already learned this. It's already been shown to you. But you either weren't paying attention, didn't care, or disagree with it, and I don't know which one is worse. Come in.
He doesn't have to ask God the interpretation. Daniel, prior to this, he had to go to God and pray. Now he doesn't. Is that because he's more spiritually mature, that he has a relationship, do you think, with God that's giving him access to what God is saying? And
God already gave him the gift to read those languages and interpret those dreams. He didn't have to ask for it. He already had it.
right, but still, in the previous time, he said, King, give me a time, and I'll come back with you. Here now, is this language that it's readable? That is.
This is an 80-year-old man, not a 14-year-old kid.
Right.
And he knows what his gifts and abilities are.
Okay.
And the Taurus, the queen, see, this is an interesting thing, and we're going to do this. If you take a list of the things that Daniel 1 says Daniel was given by God,
Yep.
and a list of the things Taurus actually saw Daniel do for 25 years, and compare those two lists, you get an interesting perspective. So Daniel didn't need to pray to God for something he had already received from God. He already had it in hand. That's how I interpret that.
Yeah, good.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And we don't know that he didn't pray, but it doesn't say he did.
So this is spiritual writing. This is
Oh no, it's physical writing in the plaster on the wall by the candlestick.
right. But I mean, could it have been read by anyone else?
No,
So it was.
only Daniel could read it because only Daniel had the gift. Not even Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had that gift.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, only Daniel had that gift.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay? And thou, his son, Belshazzar, has not humbled thine heart. You saw what happened to Nebuchadnezzar, and you didn't pay attention. You knew all this, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. You've praised the gods of silver, gold, brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, hast thou not glorified. Daniel is telling Belshazzar, you picked the wrong team. You're on the wrong side. You didn't learn from your grandfather's example. So now you have to learn it for yourself. And the part of the hand sent from him, this writing was written. And this writing that was Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And we'll look at that in great detail. And it means Daniel tells Belshazzar that he is not humble before God. His crime is the same crime of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was chastised for 7 periods as a cow in the grass. Belshazzar should have learned from that, and he didn't. So he goes directly from crime to punishment, and there's no chastisement in between. If you refuse to learn from God the lessons he's taught you, and continue to be obstinate and disobey God, and continue to refuse to yield to his teaching, there's going to come a time where he's going to turn off the chastisement button and turn on the button of wrath. And you do not want to be a sinner in the hands of an angry God. Boy, this would make a good sermon. If I ever get asked to do a sermon, I'm going to do a sermon on this chapter. It makes a good sermon. It really does. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. Paris, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and to the Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. In that night, right then, right there, right then, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. No time to learn from chastisement here. Wrath. Immediate wrath. And Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So I'm going to title this one, the chain of gold is the chain of deity, which was on Belshazzar's neck and Nabonidus' neck. And I'm going to title this 7th one, thou hast been weighed and found wanting. You've been weighed to see if you have enough to get to where God wants you to go. And you don't. You've fallen short. What's the definition of sin? Falling short of the glory of God. It's the same thing. The Bible divides sin into 3 pieces. The first part, it calls sin. The second part, it calls trespass. The third part, it calls iniquity. Sin is where if you have a target out here and you shoot an arrow, it falls short. and it does not reach the target. That's what we're talking about here. Okay? Trespass is where you could have hit the target if you wanted to, but you chose to shoot to a different direction because you thought you had a better way than God's. And iniquity is where you do what you want to do entirely and you twist things. You corrupt them. Okay? So instead of shooting the arrow, you throw a knife at it instead and do something entirely other than what God wanted you to do. Those three types of sin are embodied in Belshazzar's behavior. Therefore, he is not given chastisement as an opportunity to re-correct his path because he still is guilty of the sin and the iniquity. Okay? The sin is when he worshiped other gods. The iniquity is when he had his concubines drink from the golden vessels and twisted what they were used for. Does everybody see those parallelisms? Okay. So here's the scales. And let's summarize the 7 lessons of Daniel 5. Number 1, Belshazzar defiles the temple vessels because he worshiped false gods. No one can read the writing on the wall. Let Daniel be called to interpret the words. Daniel offered prizes to read the writing. The lesson of Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel tells Belshazzar that he is not humble before God. And 7, thou hast been weighed and found wanting. Those are the 7 subjects we'll cover over the next few weeks as we take apart chapter 5. And now you know why I gave you that extra space at the bottom of the sheet, too, with all those lines. So here he is in all his fine glory, and there's the fingers of the hand writing the words in the plaster on the wall by the candlestick. Why was the candlestick put by the wet plaster? To dry it. It all makes sense. Okay? And also to lighten it up so you could see the words. All right. Any questions on chapter 5 as a unit? Now we're going to break it down and take it section by section. Any questions of it as a unit? So do you see now how I do the study? The first thing I do an inverted triangle. I start up here with the whole chapter, and I get a sense of what it looks like, and what it looks like, how it fits in the book. Then once I do that, I break it down into its individual lessons and then take them one at a time and look at the phrases and the words as needed in the original language. Remember, the Bible is the Word of God, and it's 100% true in the original languages. We call that 100% truth inerrancy. It has no errors or mistakes. Unfortunately, over the years, it's been interpreted by mankind in various churches. Their teaching and their understanding is not inerrant like the original languages were. So we find ourselves sometime in a position where it says brass, and it can't be brass because brass didn't exist then. We know it should be bronze. Or they call something an eagle, and we know it was a vulture because the eagle didn't live in Palestine. So there's errors not in the Bible, but in the teaching of the church about what the Bible says. What I'm trying to do is go back to the original language, the original anchor, like the Bereans, and search the scripture every day to make sure what's been passed down over the years by the church is correct, and in some cases, it's not. That's what I'm trying. I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. No. The Bible's the filter. Everything has to pass through in the original languages. That's why I use the Hebrew and the Aramaic and the Greek. Okay? All right.
And John, King James is the closest one to Aramaic.
It's not. There are modern translations that are closer to those original languages than the King James,
Which one is it?
because there's been more scholarship. The Amplified Bible, the New American Standard, there are other Bibles that do a better job of translating some of the original words in context than the King James. The King James uses brass because those guys were familiar with brass instead of bronze. They use eagle because the eagle was the bird they saw out their window while they were translating, and they didn't think to put the vulture in, which is in Palestine. So the King James is the Bible I use as my base Bible, but I always check it against the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Okay? Let's look at some key words here. Belshazzar. In the Akkadian, it's Bel Shara Usar, meaning Bel protect the king. Now, who is Bel?
God, right?
That's another name for Marduk. And Marduk is the chief god of the Chaldeans. Okay? So Belshazzar, who is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, his name means that his gods, his Chaldean gods, will protect the king. The king made a great feast. The word actually here is a feast of breads. Now, why would it be a feast of breads? Let's reason together for a minute and see if we can figure this out. Why is it a feast of breads? They're under siege. There's an army all around their city. Guburu's lancers are waiting for anybody to try to get out of the city to get meat and killing them immediately. There's nothing left but the grain they've stored in their silos. All they have is bread. So they're making a feast of breads. They're doing the best they can with what they have. But the reason why it's a feast of breads is because they're under siege and they don't have anything else. Does that make sense? Okay.
John, did they think that the walls would protect them?
Absolutely. Have you studied the walls? Okay. I'm going to show you next week a diagram, a blueprint of the walls around Babylon and how it's put together. And it's pretty amazing.
I know it's can hold two chariots racing side by side, it's pretty thick, and 100 feet tall, is that the one time?
That's the outer wall.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not the middle wall and the inner wall.
Okay,
There's 3 of those walls, Barry.
all right.
And in between each one is designed to act as a vat for the burning oil. So in a lot of cases, when people would attack the outer wall, they'd actually open the gates and let the fools in, and then close the gates behind them. And then those chariots would dump the burning oil in between the 2 walls, and they'd have a barbecue like nothing you can imagine. Okay? But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Would it be safe to say that Barnabas knew all this was taking place and he headed for the exits?
You betcha. I have no doubt in my mind. I tried to tell that kid he needed to learn from his grandfather, but he just wouldn't listen. He just wanted the girls, and he wanted the concubines, and he wanted the gold and the silver. I'm getting out of Dodge, because the fat lady's about the same, and I ain't gonna be here when she does. That's how I think the Barnabas' attitude was. And he lived many years after this, in exile. Okay. So Belshazzar, we got that, great feast. 1,000 of his lords. This word here for lords means political chiefs and military captains. So he's got the military captains there. The army is inside the walls. And the political chiefs. And they drank wine. Now this is the king's wine. It's the, I don't know if I'm probably not going to use the right words here, but it's the higher alcohol content. It's the higher wine. Okay? It's the wine that's going to get you stoned. Although I understand if you drink enough of the lesser wine, that'll do it too. They drank the king's wine before the 1,000. The 1,000 didn't drink the wine. The wine was drank before them, in front of them. It's a public demonstration. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father, chief or principal or forefather, Nebuchadnezzar, now this is Nabu Kaduri Usar. It's from the verb naba, to prophesy, and the noun kud, which is a jar, and the verb nasar, which is to watch, guard, or keep. So Nebuchadnezzar is the chief priest of the Chaldeans, okay? And he captured those vessels because they had religious significance to him as well. He collected those. He liked them. So anytime he could get his arms on a religious artifact, he did it. And he took them to his temple. Well, the grandson here is going to use them for a celebration. Now, Jerusalem in the Aramaic is spelled Yerushalayim, and it means foundation of peace, just for your added information. So what are these golden and silver implements? In Ezra 1, verses 8 through 10, they're dishes, utensils, bowls, a second type of bowls, and others. There are 2,499 of them exactly. What are they used for? What were these vessels used for? The celebration of sacrifice. This was the sacrifice for sin. And these were the articles they used for the sacrifice, to collect the blood, to collect the ashes, and so forth. Here is an artist's rendition of what some of this stuff looked like. None of them have been recovered. They are lost to history. Okay? Jeremiah 28:3, Ezra 5:14, and Ezra 6:5. Sheshbazzar was supposed to restore them to the temple when he went back to Jerusalem from Babylon, and he did. And once he took them into the temple, we know they're there when Titus attacks the city in 70 AD. And they sack the city and take away the treasures. And from that point onward, they're lost to history. Some people think that they were used to finance the building of the Colosseum in Rome. That's kind of the popular thought there. So in 70 AD, they vanished from history after the Roman destruction of the Second Temple. And most scholars today, because they don't have any other better idea, feels that they funded the building of the Colosseum in Rome. Who drank from these vessels? The king, his princes, his wives, and his concubines. The king is Belshazzar. His princes is the Aramaic word Rab, R-A-B, and these are chiefs, political chiefs, and captains of the army. His wives is the word Shagal, and Shagal means mother of the heir. Okay? So the wives of the king were responsible for producing the next heir that would rule after the king father dies. A concubine was also used for producing heirs if Shagal wasn't able to do it. And all of you know about Sarah and Sarai and Hagar and all that stuff. Okay? Concubine is Lekena, L-E-C-H-E-N-A-H, and it's literally a woman who sings. They're a marital companion with no property rights. They don't inherit anything. They're not considered a wife. Okay? They bear children whose wives were barren, like Hagar. But a lot of the kings misused that. Rehoboam had 18 wives and 60 concubines. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. They were slaves with no legal rights. They were property of the king. These are the people who were gathered together here to drink. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines, drank in them. So we know that group of people used the vessels of God to worship the gods of gold, silver, and so forth. They praised the gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, so forth. Now I want you to think for a minute about Nebuchadnezzar's statue of the many different colors. And remember that gold was considered what nation? Babylon. Silver? The Medes and Persians. Brass or bronze? The Greeks or Macedonians. Iron? Rome. Wood. Where does wood come in? Well, wood comes in another prophecy called the prophecy of Zechariah. And there's an individual there, the branch, who is called a woodsmith. Another name, gentlemen. Are you ready for a tinkle time? To get a chill? Another word for woodsmith is carpenter. Do we know anybody who was important in our religious history who was a carpenter? Son? Jesus Christ. Interesting, isn't it? And stone, the last item there, is the stone that filled the world with an everlasting kingdom, never to be overturned. So we see all of these representing the kingdom of man, ending with the carpenter who brings in the kingdom that rules the world. Some people say that's the millennium kingdom. I think it's the eternal kingdom afterwards. Okay. In addition to defiling these vessels, the other thing they did was they praised other gods. Now, how many gods did the Babylonians have to praise? That's an interesting question. How many did they have? They had 124 primary gods. Okay? They had the triad of heaven. What does triad mean? Trinity. The Babylonians had a trinity. They sure did. I'll show you who they are in a minute. They had a trinity. They also had 7 planetary gods, which means their astrologers believed in 7 planets back then. That's pretty good, okay? 21 major gods, 96 lesser gods, and many cities had their own god as well. So let's look at a few of the major ones. The triad of heaven, 3 separate gods. This is page 89 and 90. Enki, which was later known as Ea, is the god of the oceans. The father of Marduk. Marduk is the divine benefactor of humanity who helped humans survive the great flood. He formed an ark with his hands and carried them through the storm. He's the author of the tablets of life given to man, the commandments given to man. This is the mythology of the Babylonians. That's Enki. Enlil, also known as Marduk, is the son. So this is God the Father, this is God the Son, their God the Father, and their God the Son. And he was the god of air and earth, and the chief of all gods on earth. And An, also known as Liu, in Akkadian, was the spirit of creation. Ladies and gentlemen, they had a Holy Spirit, a deity of the Son, and the deity of the Father.
devil is the master, the Bible calls him the master counterfeiter of God.
He's the master masquerader who masquerades as an angel of light. So he's going to duplicate everything he can. Mimic, if you will. The 7 planetary deities includes these 3, Enki, Enlil, and An. An represents the sun, Enlil represents Jupiter, and Enki represents the moon. Note, if you will, the sun, Jupiter, and the moon are the most visible in the sky. Then they had Ninhursag, who was Saturn, and he was the god of the Tigris and Euphrates River. Then they had Nana or Nergal, who was Mars, the god of the underworld, the god of war. They had Utu or Nabu, who was Mercury, the god of fields and agriculture. And they had Inanna or Ishtar, Venus, the goddess of fertility and sexuality. And incidentally, Inanna was also known as the morning star, which is the name given later to Satan. And then she was vain from her beauty and tried to overthrow Marduk to become chief of all gods and cast to earth with her demons. What does that sound like to you? Isn't that what Satan tried to do? So their equivalent of Satan was a woman. That's interesting. This also recognizes the Babylonians knew about Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn in the skies. That's pretty good astronomy. Other gods of the heavens, there's 21 majors, and they align with the constellations. Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, and so forth and so on. And 96 lesser gods, which are aligned with natural elements. They had a mineralogical table that they had invented. That was 96 members, and they were all a god. Copper, silver, bronze, tin, so forth and so on. These are smart people. Think of the technology they had even back then. And then there were individual gods for kingdoms and cities. So here's Enki, the father of the gods. Here's Enlil, Marduk, the son of Ea. And here's An, and notice, Tobin, the beards.
Yeah, despicable people. Gods. Yes.
My daughter Stephanie said, Daddy, I can braid your beard to look like that with the beads and everything. Wouldn't that drive Mr. Tobin crazy? And I says, when it gets a little longer, we're going to do that. We're going to drive Mr. Tobin nuts. But that's such a short trip.
He'll become a brother. You'll become.
Now, I want you to look at this picture real close. Come up here. Yeah. Tell me what you see on his wrist.
Oh, wow. Are those wings behind him?
Yeah. Tell me, what do you see on his wrist?
It's like a watch.
Yeah, it's still ticking. It's a wristwatch.
Wow.
Look at it. It's a wristwatch. Amazing. Notice the wristwatch that Marduk is wearing.
Wow.
I mean, John, isn't it true, if I remember correctly, that their concept of creation, which was hundreds of years before ours, okay, Genesis, okay, was ours really mimicked theirs.
I just told you that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole thing about creation in the days, but there was a warring between Father, the Son.
Well, there's similar roots.
Yes, very similar.
But that guy is wearing an Apple wristwatch.
Is it digital or?
Well, come look. You have bad eyes. Go look at it. Go look at it.
But I could tell from here the beard looks hideous.
Jealousy doesn't become. Look at it. It looks like You can even see where you pull that up to set that, it looks like a wristwatch.
Sure does. My gosh. That is bizarre. That's interesting.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you tell who the maker is?
It says it's a T-I-M.
Yes.
Like I said, it's still ticking.
Yeah.
Okay?
That is.
Amazing.
That was all,
Oh
that
my
watch
gosh.
was random. He found it in the woods. It just evolved.
Yes.
All right. I want to make this class fun. I hope I've done that. Okay? All right. Let's finish this up for today. I want to read you Daniel 5:5-6. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed and his thoughts troubled him. Now listen to this. That the joints of his loins were loosed. What does that mean? It means exactly what you think it means.
Diarrhea.
Yeah. He lost his cookies. And anything else that was on the menu. All right? That's exactly right. The way the commentary describes it, I love how they try to make this sound. Fecal incontinence is how they say it. He was so terrified, he lost control of his bowels. He's scared, and his knees smote against one another. So what happened as a result of his actions, the writing is on the wall, okay? Written by the fingers of a man's hand, and it terrified the king. That's where we'll stop for today. It's a great place to stop.